Ever wonder why certain seasons and times of the month females have more or less energy? In today's episode, I speak with certified birth healing specialist and owner of the Wild Orange Tree in Australia, occupational therapist Janelle Gullan. Janelle explains the unique value of each phase of a woman's monthly cycle. Hello, friends. This is Lynn Schulte, and you are listening to the Birth Healing Summit podcast. We are here for meaningful conversations that will transform the way you work with pregnant and postpartum clients. Whether it is a new perspective, tool, or technique, you'll be able to implement it into your practice today. I invite you to sit back, listen with an open mind, and grab the golden nugget today's guest has to offer. Now let's get started. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode. I'm excited to introduce you to Janelle Gullan. Janelle is an occupational therapist from Melbourne, Australia. She owns the Wild Orange Tree as her clinical practice. And Janelle and I are going to be talking today about the rhythm of our cycles. So tell us, Janelle, what do you mean by that? Welcome to the podcast first.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Lynn. And menstrual cycles is something that I am really passionate about in my work, and I see it being so incredibly relevant to supporting mamas as they come through that pregnancy, birth, and postpartum experience. It really is a way that we can make a bit more sense of the scenes that we find ourselves in, and also have some insights into what it might look like to really care for ourselves, or what as practitioners we might be able to have conversations with our clients about how they might be able to care for themselves and make sense of that using their menstrual rhythm as a guide. But I also want to acknowledge that menstrual cycles, it's like this big taboo topic, really. I think we're
Right?
getting a bit better at talking about it. Um, but still, it's not something that we talk freely about, that we dive deeper into. And I encounter so many mums that go through that pregnancy postpartum experience and go, why didn't anyone tell me about my cyclical body and about my menstrual cycle and how all of this relates to mothering? We're meant to be learning about this stuff at menarche, when we get our first period, or being exposed to it even before that. But so many of us land in pregnancy and postpartum going, what happened and how does this sit in my body? So I want to talk a bit about that today.
Okay, cool. So what do you mean by these cycles? Tell us more about that.
Yeah. So our
Or the
menstrual
rhythm of this.
cycle, the rhythm of the cycle, our menstrual cycle, many authors and people have used the seasons as an analogy for that rhythm that we flow through in our monthly menstrual cycle. And when I say monthly cycle, I want to acknowledge that some people's cycles are shorter than that and some people's are longer
Yeah.
than that. But we have this approximate monthly rhythm. So our bleeding time is the start of the cycle. That's day one. And this is akin to winter. So often when we get our period, we sort of feel this urge to slow down a little bit. It's a season of honoring. It's a season of checking in with ourselves. It can be a season of rest and restoration. Not that we have to stay in bed the whole time, but we can be curious about how we can nourish our body through that time. And
Yeah.
once we leave our bleeding time, we then
Hey,
come
wait,
into
let's
spring.
talk about
Oh,
that a little bit more. Sorry,
go
because
for it.
because there's such a stigma of the
Yes.
bleeding, and so many women are embarrassed by it,
Yes.
and we just want to like ignore it,
Yes.
and hope it goes away soon, right?
Yes.
But yet, like you said, it's this winter season, and it's actually should be a time for us to really maybe just take a slower step, take a step back, and
Mm.
not try to be as productive as we are in the other parts of our cycle,
Yeah.
right? I know I
Yeah.
have an acupuncturist friend who she schedules herself out, and when she knows she's going to be on, when she's bleeding, she's not
Yeah.
seeing as many clients that week, that she
Yes.
is actually taking it slower and
Yeah.
honoring what her body's doing in that time. And for us doing intravaginal work, I know we all get the calls, oh, I'm on my period, I gotta cancel, right? And,
Yes.
and I'm like, no, actually,
No,
please come in because it's a beautiful time to
it is.
be releasing and letting go of what's no longer serving you. And so doing intravaginal work during our bleeding cycle is
Yeah.
a beautiful time for us to be working
Yes.
together. And so
Mm.
I think us changing that message for people of like, we shouldn't shy away from doing intravaginal work during a period. I do
Yeah.
let it be up to my client. I'm like, as long as you're comfortable with it, I am, but
Yes.
I would encourage you to be comfortable with it, right?
Completely agree. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I just want to make sure that everyone hears that we could be encouraging our clients to help them to slow down during this time. And like that, to me,
Mm.
the cycles of the season, I think of a bear. Like a bear,
Yes.
like a bear is a perfect example of like in the wintertime, they hibernate, right?
Yep.
And so we don't need to actually stay in bed. And fortunately, a lot of people in pain do because
Yeah.
their cycles are too painful. But that's kind of like that. Let's slow down. Let's not do so much during that time frame.
Mm.
Like a bear would be hibernating right now.
Yes.
So then tell
Exactly.
us what happens next.
Yeah. And there's a point I want to come back to that you brought up then, but let's finish the seasons. So
Okay.
once our bleed finishes, we come into that follicular phase in our cycle, and this is springtime. Often we notice that little bit more energy. Maybe we want to, oh, hey, let's go and do this, or we might notice new ideas and inspiration coming up. And again, like spring is a season where we think of all the blossoms are coming out, and it's the fruit of the winter. It's because
Yeah.
nature rested and took that moment to pause that we then have this energy to blossom into what is coming about in this cycle, which then
Oh.
leads to ovulation and the summer season, so pool party season of our cycle. And many of us will notice like changes in our libido. We might feel more outgoing. Maybe we notice that we dress a little bit differently. We put ourselves out there. We might be saying yes to all the work projects. Like this is productive summer energy at its absolute peak. But as I like to say, with any kind of creative or productive activity, you can't keep doing it. Like a writer can't write and write and write and write and write. At some point, they've got to shift. Like an artist can't just paint and paint and paint and paint. You actually have to shift into this next season. And this is what our luteal phase is. It's the autumn season. It's the
Mhm.
season where we start to that energy starts shifting again. It comes more inwards again. It's a season that calls us to the reflection. It's the season where our inner critic is meant to live, not in a destructive way, but in a how did that go? How did that work for you? What can we learn from this cycle that we have had? What would we want to do differently next time? What things are coming up? Like in autumn, we talk about the veil getting thin, and a lot of things that we might actually be feeling or that might be truth for us our whole cycle, they really come to the fore. We can't always trust the volume. Sometimes our body starts screaming us very loudly about how horrible our partner is, how awful our job is, but we can take note of those themes and go, is there actually something here that I want to be curious about? And then when we come back to our winter season, this is actually the season where we can sit with that and we can ponder that and go, is there actually some message in there for me? And how do I want to use my next springtime energy to do something about that? So
Nice.
we've got this beautiful rhythm that flows through that I really believe someone knew that we needed this rhythm to keep us on track, not to just
Yes.
keep going and going and going, like feminine energy, it's easy to think that it's dainty and fluffy and delicate. No, she's harder. She goes and she goes and she goes and she
Yeah.
pushes through and she gets up to that baby and she makes sure the family is fine and she's taking meals to someone else and she's sacrificing this. She is hard ass. We need this reminder that yes, we have these seasons where we can push through and go hard and do what needs to be done, but we can't do that forever. We have to keep creating this rhythm of coming back and checking in and seeing what's serving us, being curious about any shifts that we want to make, and
Yeah.
then go from there.
Yeah.
So that's the cycle as we experience it outside of pregnancy and postpartum.
Yeah, I don't think many of us learn about that.
No, we
No,
don't.
I mean, all we
Yeah.
get in school is this is going to happen to you and this is what happens, like we learn about the egg and the bleeding and that.
Yep.
But from an energetic level, it's that I love how you say in the autumn, so in the luteal phase after
Mhm.
ovulation, making its way to the start of the bleeding is that autumn phase where we can be more reflective. And you said the veil gets thinner, right?
Yeah.
And so I know that in indigenous cultures, they during the bleeding cycle, they will sit around and listen to the dreams of the menstruating women.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's so cool because we are more connected to spirit during that time, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely so. Definitely so. But again, so often we aren't taught this rhythm
No.
that sits in our body, and so when that connection comes up, when we start noticing these things, we can start thinking that there's something wrong with us, or that we're going crazy, or
Yeah.
we have this completely opposite interpretation of these cycles. But where I really want to go with this is there's this amazing saying, I believe it's a Native American saying, that at menarche, at our first period, we're meant to meet this power that lives within the rhythm of our cycle. And throughout life, we get to practice it. And at menopause, we become it. So
Ooh.
at menopause, we no longer need this reminder of how to live rhythmically. But what I want to come back to is this practicing, because pregnancy and postpartum is this same cycle played out. So, pregnancy overall can be seen as an autumn energy. We've had that ovulation where conception occurred, and then we come into the autumn of pregnancy. It's this invitation to slow down, to shed, to start getting ready for whatever this transition is as we move into mothering, into parenting, get ready for the birth. But we can also break it down a little bit more. Sometimes I think of that 2 week wait, when if we're consciously trying to conceive and we're sitting around going, come on, I want to be able to test. We're in this liminal space of, oh, I don't know. That's
Yeah.
very much autumn energy. But then the first trimester of pregnancy is actually winter energy, which is fascinating because so many of us, we're out there pretending that we're not pregnant, like we're putting water in our glasses, hoping people think it's gin, and we're carrying on as though it is summer in our cycle, but we're actually usually really tired. Our body is using so many resources to create that baby. It's an inner hibernation, and I think many of us would go, oh, it'd be very nice to stay in bed during that first trimester. It is
Right?
winter. So, how do we honor that in our bodies?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how can that knowledge that you're actually in winter actually support a mama through that first trimester of her pregnancy?
Wow.
I think we can also be curious when we encounter this longer winter of that first trimester. It's obviously much longer than that 3 to maybe 7 days of winter that we've encountered in our menstrual cycle. It's this longer winter. We can start getting curious about what actually helped us with that, because postpartum is an even bigger winter. We're going to get to that. So I love talking to mums about what actually helped you in that first trimester. What sort of supports were really useful to nourish yourself at that time? And is there something we can learn from that to get ready for
Yeah.
after birth? But so winter of first trimester, often, and I really want to acknowledge there are some people out there like with HG and really terrible morning sickness where this winter persists for most of or all of the
Yeah.
pregnancy. But a lot of people in that second trimester, they'll start noticing springtime energy. They'll go, whew, I can eat more than
Yeah.
crackers now. Oh, I've actually got a bit of energy. Maybe I'm going to start planning what I need to get down at the baby store for this baby. We
Yeah.
notice that springtime energy. And then maybe it's towards the end of that second trimester. We might go, "Oh, you're absolutely glowing, mama." Well, she's hit her summertime of pregnancy. That's the time when we do all the planning and we're doing the cook up to put in our freezer for after birth. And
Yep.
our body gives us this more outward energy to do what needs to be done. But then the third trimester, we're back to autumn. We might start nesting. We might start going, oh, actually, I don't really want to go out. I just want to hang at home and wash baby clothes. Or
Yeah.
this autumn energy usually comes to us at some point late in that pregnancy. It's that slowing down, it's that surrendering, it's that getting ready for the change, that letting go and preparation for whatever this birth experience is going to require of us. So
Oh,
whether we think of all of pregnancy as generally that autumn energy, or we can see a little cycle happening through there, that is practicing our cycles, as that traditional
uh-huh.
saying says. But then after birth, we come to this prolonged winter phase. Postpartum is winter. And sometimes I use the analogy of the deep, dark winter in Narnia, where they've had winter for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
And so, in the perfect world, we've had this monthly opportunity to practice a short winter during the bleed in our menstrual cycle. We've had a longer winter through that first trimester, and we've built up some of these skills and resources for what does it look like for us to nurture ourselves in that hibernation of winter. And then we get to practice that even more intensely during that postpartum. Because I think many mums would go, yeah, that really felt like a winter. It can feel pretty deep and
Yeah.
dark. And we
Yeah.
really need those supports around us to nourish us through that winter. But also honoring, as hard as that winter season can feel, that winter has a purpose. Winter leads us to spring. And if we think about matrescence, this developmental process of becoming a mother, some of that deep underworld work that shows up
Yeah.
in those postpartum phases, that is shifting things, it is moving things, it's mothermorphosis, it's getting us ready for that spring that emerges out the other side.
Did you say mother morphosis? I
Mothermorphosis.
love that term.
Dr. Oscar Serelak, he's a
Yes.
GP in Australia who's written the
Love him.
postnatal depletion cure. So that
Yep.
depletion is when that deep dark winter completely sucks us in. He talks about mothermorphosis in
Yeah.
some of his programs, and it's the most amazing work. I absolutely love it. And
Yeah.
mothermorphosis happens in winter. It
Ah,
happens in winter when we are supported, whether it's through seeking some soft tissue based support, or this bony based support, visceral work through a pelvic health practitioner, or maybe it's some mental health support, or maybe it's real practical supports that we have around us, like this village that we know we
yeah.
need, that we often struggle to access in our day-to-day culture. It's in that winter of those seasons that this mothermorphosis occurs for us.
Well, and so many people, I mean, I would say the number one issue that I see a lot in my clients, and I have it in myself, is that inability to just be
Yeah,
and to slow down and to know that it's okay.
yeah,
Our society is just not supportive of that.
yes,
And I think that's one of the biggest issues that women deal with is the
yeah,
ability to just slow down.
yeah.
And I love you bringing the awareness of that rhythm to our cycles because I have heard of
Mhm,
that. Can't
mhm,
say that I ever really practiced it myself. And I think that's one thing in listening to you share this, Janelle, is that feeling those sensations in our body. I don't
mhm.
know if many of us give ourselves permission to feel that potential slowing down or I mean maybe we get the
Mm,
cramps during our cycle during our bleeding
mm,
time that might slow us down a little bit but to
yeah.
really give ourselves permission that hey this is a time for me to just chill out and relax a little bit more
Mm,
here and
mm.
not be going full tilt. with
Yeah.
everything that I'm supposed to be doing. And especially, we all know that postpartum.
Yes, enormously so. So I think the point that I really want to make is when we recognize postpartum is this winter season, we have this language that we can use with the mamas, the women, the birthing people that we encounter in our practice, and we can get curious about what does it look like to fully lean into that winter. And I know we were briefly talking about like things like maternity leave policies in the US. Like a lot of mums have to get back to work really, really quickly, which flies in the face of this knowledge that postpartum is an extended winter. So is it just the fact that in the session, is it in that half an hour, that hour, whatever it is that that person's spending with us? Can that be a time to honor the winter? Can we bring the slowness? Can we bring the spaciousness to bring nourishment into the body? Is that how that mama honors and accesses the winter? Is it about the way that we talk to her around what kind of supports does she have around her? Are there ways that she could use them to help honor this winter season that she's actually in? Is when in the big and in the small ways that we can honor whatever season that we're in, particularly in these postpartum seasons. It has such enormous impacts on that recovery process and how that mama transitions through and how she re-engages with that
Yeah.
springtime season at the end of that postpartum.
Yeah. Is there a specific time frame for that?
Mm.
When does winter end postpartum? When does spring
Yeah.
begin? Or is it all individual as far as listening to
Mm.
your body and sensing into it then?
Yeah. I think there's lots of different ways to think about this because we're never just in one cycle. Our bodies are in cycles within cycles within
Yeah.
cycles. Like traditionally, it was thought that postpartum was a 3-year time period and that a mother needed physical, emotional, spiritual, practical support for that extended period of time as she fully integrated this new mothering role. And I see a lot of mums at the end of that 3 years go, oh, something has shifted.
Yeah.
But other mums, like they might notice at the end of that 6 weeks where they go,
Yeah.
oh, it just feels a little bit lighter here. Maybe it's at the end of 9 months, that concept of 9 months in, 9 months out.
Yeah.
We might
Yeah.
notice that, oh, okay, we're starting to get a spring, but we might also be in winter continuing as well. These cycles can kind of break off each
Mm,
other.
I see. Yeah.
Um, like there's so many things that bring cycles. We might be in a one cycle with one child and then find ourselves pregnant, which brings us into another
Yes.
cycle in different seasons with another child.
Well,
We have
I was,
cycles in our, yeah, we have cycles in our relationships, we have cycles in our work, we have cycles in our families as a whole, we have cycles in hobbies and projects that we're taking on. The seasons around us, like they influence it
yeah.
as well. Like I know a lot of mums say, I feel so different giving birth in winter versus summer and so forth. So we're always cycles within cycles. And sometimes that can be really powerful just to sit down and actually map, where am I in all of these cycles? Is there a dominant season? Or is this where I'm really feeling torn? And what cycles is it most of a priority to be honoring right now to supporting where I'm at? Lots of nuances in how we experience that.
Cool. Wow. What an eye-opening talk here. Thank you for this, Janelle.
Yeah.
I really hope everybody listening in, number one, gives themselves permission to tune into the rhythm
Mm,
of their cycle.
yeah.
We have to
And
start there.
and ask the person who you're working with, where are
Yes.
you in your
Yes.
menstrual cycle? Because that can really just intuitively give you a sense of, okay, we're in a releasing phase in this cycle, or no, we're actually in a growth phase. And that might really impact how we work with a limiting belief or what the tissues are going to want to do. We can use that knowledge to actually match the season that that client is in, or if they're in pregnancy and postpartum and don't have their menstrual cycle, might be that you tune in and go, oh, where are you in your pregnancy? Or, oh, you're in winter of postpartum. We can use that knowledge to work with the body body and listen to the body and help honor what the body is needing at that point in time too.
And for those that are in menopause, you're
Mm,
still in a rhythm that I
we
hear is tied
are.
into the moon cycle. So we can tune into,
Yeah.
yeah. Do you know more about that or?
Definitely. Some people find it's really useful to use the moon as a way just to continually just notice where they are in that cycle. It's quite fascinating, even for people that have found their menstrual cycle really inconvenient and so forth.
Yeah.
When it's gone, they kind of go, oh, like I used to track time by that. Or it's really interesting to hear what people say. But like, it's that notion, we've got that traditional American saying at menopause, we become that power. There's this notion if we have these opportunities to engage with our cycle, we're not needing this physical monthly reminder of our bleed to go, hey, what are you doing to look after yourself? There's
Yeah.
this plan here that we should be reaching this point where we know we've practiced that, we've learned that, we've
Yes.
become it. But since we live in a culture where we don't get that, using the moon can be a really powerful way to keep giving ourselves those reminders of, hey, I actually need to come inwards. Hey, it's actually time to look outwards and see what's happening there. I think the moon's a classic example. The moon never actually changes its shape or its size. It's
Right.
always the moon. It's just the parts that we're seeing and reflecting. And I think that's the same with our menstrual cycle. It's not that we are more or less at certain times in our cycle. It's just that we're reflecting differently. Our energy might be more inwards or more outwards. It's not that we are lesser at certain points. It's just what is the purpose in this season and how are we showing up to support that?
And so how did like is the full moon menstruation? Is the full moon ovulation? What do you know
Yeah.
those cycles?
Traditionally speaking, the full moon is ovulation, so that
Mhm.
fullness in that,
Yeah.
yeah, the fertile cycle or the mothering cycle. So bleeding on the new moon. Again, there's this really beautiful traditional saying that when you can't see the moon in the sky, the only place to look is inwards. And so this notion with our bleed, if it's on the new moon, there's no light out there, we look inwards to see what's happening here. So for those that are into those sorts of things, it's an interesting thought to ponder.
Yeah.
But it's also interesting because traditionally it has been thought that people like the midwives and the teachers and the healers, they would actually menstruate on the opposite. So that when the rest of the community was in their bleed, they were actually in their ovulation energy and they were able to provide support. And
Uh,
then they would bleed with the full moon. And it's really interesting. I notice in myself, whenever I'm putting myself out there and offering a course or a training or something like that, so often my menstrual cycle flips and I start bleeding with the full moon. And then when I step away from that, I guess more putting myself out there
uh,
role, I can find that it turns around and I'm back bleeding with the new moon. So
oh,
we can be
interesting.
curious about these
Yeah.
things. But yeah, there's this idea that the midwives and the healers and those sorts of people would actually cycle opposite so that the women would be there to care for each
Sure.
other when they needed that honoring and that tending in their winter
Yeah.
seasons. So
Yeah. Wow.
fascinating.
It is fascinating, isn't it? And I so appreciate you bringing this to our attention and helping us to understand it on a deeper level. And
Mm,
we all can take this information and share it with our clients. And I think the biggest takeaway for me is to just help people to learn how to take a step back and to just rest a little bit more and know that it is okay to slow down. And,
mm,
our bleeding time is a time of more introspective, and just being okay doing less
yes.
during that time.
Whatever that looks like for
What,
someone.
yeah, for them, for you.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely agree. Well, thank you so much for this. This is so enlightening. And I really, boy, what a different world it would be if all women, all menstruating people would honor this more.
Mm,
It would be a totally different
enormous.
world, wouldn't it?
It
Yeah.
really would. Like we are so caught up in this patriarchal construct of very linear, onwards, upwards striving,
Go, go,
um,
go. Do,
like
do.
like that masculine rhythm of go hard and then the pause is overnight. Like the masculine body lives in that very 24-hour clock, whereas the feminine body, we have this much longer rhythm. And when we tune into it, we can get some really crucial insights about how we can actually show up in all the incredible things we're wanting to put out into the world even more powerfully, because we honor those inner needs and those slower rhythms that come around to us as well.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I'm already planning my winter hibernation period.
I love it.
Coming up here soon. We're heading into winter this time of year, Janelle. I know you guys are
Yes.
into summer,
We're
aren't
on the opposite end.
you?
Yes.
Yes, yes. Oh, wow. Such wonderful information. Thank you so much. Thank you everybody for listening into this, and please take it into your cycle and figure out your rhythm, and let us know, how are you changing what you do during different parts of your cycle? I'd be so curious to hear. So reach out and let me know. And thanks everybody for listening in. Here's to smoother births, faster recoveries, and a more rhythmic cycle to your
Oh, I
menstrual
love it.
cycle. All right. Take care, everybody. See you on the next
Bye-bye.
episode. Bye-bye. Today's podcast was brought to you by the Institute for Birth Healing. To discover more, visit instituteforbirthhealing.com. To claim $50 off of any online course, use coupon code podcast50 at checkout. Till next time, I'm Lynn Schulte, founder of the Institute for Birth Healing.